Hey guys, today we're going to take you along the African American History Trail in Greenwood, Mississippi. I got Richard behind the camera and Robbie doing the driving. Come along with us. Let's go explore. Our first stop on the trail is Bryants Grocery. This picture of the grocery is on the back of the Freedom Trail marker, and it's as the grocery would have appeared in August of 1955. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago who was in the area visiting family members. Emmett had an encounter with the wife of the store's owner, who was white, and he was then kidnapped and murdered. The men responsible were never convicted for the murder, and the outrage this caused was considered by many to be the impetus of the civil rights movement. As you can see, there is not very much left of Bryant's Grocery. I wish somebody could come along and at least preserve the door frame, because I think it belongs in the Smithsonian. This is what's left of Bryant's Grocery, stop number 1 on Greenwood's Civil Rights Tour. In June of 1966, James Meredith was conducting his March Against Fear from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. Greenwood was the halfway point of the march. Stokely Carmichael, the SNCC, or the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's chairman, and 2 other marchers had been arrested for pitching tents on a school campus. By the time that they had been bailed out, more than 600 marchers and local people had gathered in this park. They followed Stokely Carmichael's and Willie Ricks's lead, shouting, "What do we want? Black power. What do we want? Black power." As the slogan captured the imagination of young African Americans, Black Power came to mean organizing in your community and controlling your own destiny, becoming a united front and organizing for political power. Before this event, African Americans had been working hard for the right to vote and trying to put people in office that would improve their quality of life. But after this event, now all of a sudden, they could give voice to Black Power. The SNCC started talking about Black Power. Don't forget, if you like this content, hit that like button and share this video on your favorite social media. Next is Union Grove Missionary Baptist Church, and in 1963 they participated in the primary election freedom vote. They were the first Baptist church in Greenwood to open its doors to the civil rights movement. Comedian Dick Gregory spoke at the church in the spring of that year. He was conducting a food and clothing drive because the supervisors had discontinued federal commodities distribution. Next, we're going to look at a Catholic church building that served as a hospital and a food distribution center in the years before the civil rights movement. Reverend Aaron Johnson allowed the SNCC to hold a meeting in this sanctuary after the Elks Lodge had refused to host any more meetings. The place was packed for preaching, testimonies, and singing. A Greenwood farmer named Cleveland Jordan had started challenging the voter registration laws as early as 1951. He used his influence in the Elks Lodge to help make it available for SNCC meetings in 1962. This ended after just 2 meetings when lodge members bowed to pressure from the Citizens Council. Jennings Temple Methodist Church served as a polling place for the 1963 primary election freedom vote. This was the first time that many local African Americans enjoyed the opportunity to cast a ballot. On March 16, 1968, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at Jennings Temple just before traveling to Memphis in support of sanitation workers. In March of 1963, COFO headquarters were burned, so they then moved to Friendship Baptist Church. The congregation and minister reluctantly joined the movement, but their actions inspired many others to do so. In fact, then 31 ministers signed a petition endorsing the growing civil rights movement in Greenwood. Next up, we're going to visit Turner Chapel AME Church. This African Methodist Episcopal Church served as a gathering place during August 1963 primary election freedom vote. It was from Wesley United Methodist Church that SNCC Executive Secretary James Foreman led a large group of protesters towards City Hall. Here they were met by city officials and police. There was even one off-duty policeman with a leashed German Shepherd. This is the modern-day street view of where that confrontation took place. As close as I can tell, this photographed confrontation took place right about here, with the photographer facing right about this angle. Now we're going to spin around and walk up the street just a bit and take a look at the Greyhound bus station. Public transportation systems were segregated, and local vandals, intent on reminding travelers of the rules, spray-painted the walls. Their graffiti defaced every corner of this building. Now let's just turn around a bit and let's take a look at Greenwood City Hall. This is a 1930s Art Deco building, and it used to house the police department in the 60s. There were many confrontations between city officials and movement organizers on City Hall's lawn and in its hallways. This is the Leflore County Courthouse. It became sort of a focal point for protesters where they would frequently culminate their marches and demonstrate. Press representatives from around the world set up on the corner of Market and Fulton Streets to cover the confrontations. City officials clashed with the growing voters' rights movement. We're on West McLaurin Street, and now we are standing right about where the photographer was standing when they snapped this picture of the March Against Fear. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. is front and center as marchers head up the incline of the IC Railroad, crossing from West McLaurin to Courthouse Street. The marchers were moving up the street in this direction as they made their way towards City Hall and the confrontations that awaited there. This is the corner of Main Street and Gibbs Street. You can see civil rights leaders Andrew Young, Stokely Carmichael, and Martin Luther King Jr. as they lead a group of protesters through the streets of Greenwood in June of 1966. The photographer would have been standing right about where I am, and the protesters were marching up the street in this direction. We hope you've seen enough of the Greenwood Civil Rights Trail to have learned something and maybe even consider coming and exploring it for yourself sometime. Thank you.